3 hours after we lowered my brother into the ground, my husband slid divorce papers across our kitchen counter while still wearing the black tie from the burial. Snow melted from his coat onto the tile while he unbuttoned his collar and said the words that collapsed the last wall I had built around the truth of my marriage. "I'm leaving you for your brother's wife." I stood there watching his face, waiting for something human to surface. Regret, shame, anything. Nothing came. He simply straightened the documents and said, "Just sign them, Dana. Make it clean." My brother Thomas had been dead for less than 4 hours. He was killed on an interstate outside Cleveland. 51 years old, sharp, steady, the kind of man who quietly covered hospital bills for people who never found out who paid them. He built Crestline Transport from a handful of leased vans into one of the most respected freight operations in the region. And somehow the man standing in my kitchen, the man Thomas trusted like a brother, was already calculating what came next. My husband, Ryan, at the funeral, he had performed grief with precision. His hand on my shoulder, his voice low and measured, his expression carefully composed. But looking back now, I can see exactly where his attention kept drifting. Toward Thomas's widow, Vanessa, composed, polished, tailored black dress. Tears that arrived exactly when they should have. I had hated myself that afternoon for noticing. Now I understood my instincts had been speaking clearly the entire time. When Ryan told me he intended to marry Vanessa, I asked the only question I cared about. How long? He poured himself a drink before answering. Long enough. No remorse. No hesitation. Just arithmetic. Then he added the sentence I will carry with me for the rest of my life. "You were never meant for the kind of life I'm building." That should have destroyed me. Instead, something inside me went completely quiet, because right then I remembered the voicemail Thomas left me 2 nights before he died. I still hadn't opened it. Ryan slid the papers forward again. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." I looked down at the signatures already pre-positioned, the asset waivers already drafted, the separation terms already structured. He had prepared all of this before Thomas was even buried. That single realization rearranged everything. He expected tears, he expected pleading, or maybe cold fury. Instead, I picked up the pen and signed my name without a word. For the first time that evening, something flickered across his face. Surprise. "That's it." I gave him a small smile. "You seem like you're in a hurry." 40 minutes later he walked out carrying one bag. The moment his taillights disappeared, I pressed play on Thomas's voicemail. There was a long pause before he spoke. "Dana, if you're hearing this." Something probably happened before I could sit down and explain things properly. My throat tightened immediately. Then, quietly, "Don't trust anyone until you've spoken with Arthur Crane." The weeks that followed were sleepless. Not because I missed Ryan. Once the initial shock dissolved, every small detail I had ignored came flooding back with brutal clarity. The late calls he framed as work, the way Vanessa always found reasons to touch his arm at company dinners, the quiet arrogance that had been growing in him for years. Everything rearranged itself into a shape I should have recognized far sooner. Ryan and Vanessa stopped hiding almost immediately. Photos surfaced online within days of the service. Restaurant openings, weekend escapes to Lake Michigan, arms around each other beside candlelit tables. In one image, Ryan was wearing Thomas's watch, the one I gave my brother on his 40th birthday. That particular detail was difficult to sit with. Not because Ryan looked happy, because Thomas had trusted him completely. 2 weeks later I returned to Crestline's offices in downtown Columbus. The moment I stepped onto the executive floor, conversations dropped off mid-sentence. Everyone already knew. Ryan had essentially installed himself as acting CEO. Thomas's longtime assistant, Miriam, pulled me aside the second she saw me. "You need to understand what's been happening," she said under her breath. He had been holding meetings from Thomas's office, reviewing restructuring proposals, speaking to department heads as though the transition were already final. Vanessa had appeared twice that week. When I walked in and found Ryan sitting behind my brother's desk wearing my brother's watch, something in me permanently cooled. "What exactly are you doing?" I asked, keeping things moving. He answered without looking up, "Someone has to. Your regional accounts." He leaned back in the chair. "These things shift." Then he said the part that revealed the entire plan. "Vanessa controls the estate anyway." There it was. He believed the company flowed through Vanessa now, and through Vanessa, eventually to him. I asked one careful question. "Did Thomas know about you before he died?" Ryan's expression shifted for just a fraction of a second, something that looked almost like fear. Then the office door opened. Arthur Crane walked in. Thomas's attorney. Quiet, grave, unhurried in the specific way of men who have held serious information for a long time. He looked at Ryan evenly and said, "I need a few minutes alone with Dana." Ryan left without argument, though not without looking back once. The moment the door closed, Arthur set a sealed envelope on the desk. "Your brother made significant revisions before he passed," he said carefully. "He asked me to hold everything until 30 days had elapsed." "Why 30 days?" Arthur looked at me directly. "Because Thomas believed that when people think they've already won, they show you exactly who they are. That month was a kind of education. Ryan grew bolder by the week. He and Vanessa hosted dinners at Thomas's house, removed family photographs from the office walls, spoke openly about restructuring plans as though ownership were simply a formality waiting on paperwork. But certainty makes people careless. And Thomas had been quietly arranging things long before any of us understood what he was doing. The morning of the reading, media had gathered outside the law office. Word had moved through business circles faster than anyone expected. When I entered the conference room, Ryan was already seated and almost visibly relaxed. Vanessa sat beside him in a charcoal dress, composed, already inhabiting the role. They looked less like mourners and more like principals arriving to close a deal. Arthur entered at exactly 9, carrying a portfolio of folders. Then he began. Under the amended terms of Thomas Whitfield's estate, sole controlling beneficiary of Crestline Transport and all associated executive holdings is Dana Whitfield. Silence settled over the room. Ryan blinked. Vanessa's expression didn't move for a moment. Then Ryan actually laughed. "Come on." Arthur didn't shift. Estate law rarely benefits from humor. "Mr. Calloway." Vanessa's color drained. Ryan grabbed the documents and started reading frantically. "No," he said quietly. "This isn't right." Arthur folded his hands. "Your brother established a personal support trust for Vanessa. Operational authority over all primary holdings transfers directly to Dana." I watched the future they had constructed together dissolve in real time. Ryan stood. Thomas would never structure it this way. Arthur opened a second folder. Actually, he documented exactly why he did. He picked up a remote. A screen on that wall came to life, and Thomas appeared, sitting at his desk, navy sweater, completely calm. For a moment I forgot how to breathe entirely. "If you're watching this," Thomas said. Then Arthur was right about how things would go. Ryan sat back, down slowly. Thomas looked directly into the camera. "Ryan, I know about the accounts." The color left Ryan's face completely. "And I know about you and Vanessa." Vanessa pressed her hand over her mouth. I closed my eyes for a second. He had known everything. The theft, the affair, all of it. He had simply needed time to protect me first. I didn't say anything because I needed the documentation in order, Thomas continued, and because I needed my sister in a safe position before any of this became visible. Ryan erupted. "This has been manipulated." "Sit down," Arthur said flatly. Ryan kept going, pointing across the table. "She poisoned everything against me." Arthur calmly produced another document. "There's a final matter." Ryan went silent. "During your divorce filing, you voluntarily executed a full marital asset waiver. You relinquished every future claim connected to Dana Whitfield's holdings." I watched understanding arrive on his face like a slow collision. He had moved through the divorce quickly, confidently, certain I was the one walking away with nothing. Certain Vanessa held the fortune. Certain he had positioned himself perfectly. But Thomas had left everything to me: the company, the investments, the executive authority, even the accounts Ryan had been quietly drawing from for years. Ryan looked physically unwell. Then something almost quiet happened. Vanessa stood. She picked up her bag. She looked at Ryan with an expression I recognized as the end of something. "You told me Crestline was essentially transitioning to you, Vanessa." "No." And she walked out. The great love story that ended my marriage lasted 11 days after the reading before she left his life entirely. Security walked Ryan out of the building that afternoon. Outside on the street, reporters were waiting and wind was moving hard through downtown. I was heading for the elevator when he caught my arm. "You knew this whole time." His voice was ragged. "No," I said honestly. "I suspected." He looked at me. "We can go back." I almost said something unkind. Instead, I thought about him in Thomas's chair. "You moved into my brother's house before the burial flowers were gone. I made mistakes. You were involved with his wife while he was alive." He looked away. Then softly I said the thing that finished it. "You told me I wasn't built for the life you wanted." He said nothing. "Now you understand which one of us wasn't." 3 days later, Crestline's internal audit confirmed financial irregularities tied to Ryan's account access across several contracts, not a fortune. Just enough to make himself feel like someone who mattered. That's the thing about men like Ryan. They confuse proximity to power with power itself. Standing beside someone extraordinary doesn't transfer what made that person extraordinary. The months that followed were overwhelming in ways I hadn't prepared for. I was terrified, honestly. But grief does something particular to people who've been underestimated for a long time. It clarifies. I started arriving before the building opened, reading every contract, walking loading facilities, sitting with dispatchers and regional managers the way Thomas always had. Slowly something shifted. People started bringing me problems instead of working around me. Not because I had answers for everything, because I was actually there. One afternoon, a senior logistics coordinator caught me near the freight bays and said something I've thought about many times since. "You know what separates you from him, tell me." He wanted the company to confirm he was important. "You want the company to actually work." That was Thomas's real inheritance to me, not the assets, the understanding of what they were actually for. Months later, Ryan appeared at my door during a hard rain. Standing under the porch light, soaked, looking somehow smaller than I remembered. The confident posture was completely gone, the expensive clothes replaced by something ordinary. "I lost everything," he said quietly when I opened the door. I looked at him for a moment, not with satisfaction, with something closer to grief. Because underneath the ambition and the betrayal had always been a man who believed that acquiring enough would final. Why make him feel like he was enough? "I was wrong," he said. "Yes," I answered softly. Then his voice broke. "I thought getting there would make everything else stop mattering." That sentence stayed in the air between us because I understood it, not the choices he made, but the emptiness underneath them. The belief that achievement could silence shame. It never does. He started crying then, genuine, exhausted tears. "Please," he whispered. "Please, I'm asking you." And there on my front porch in the Illinois rain, Ryan Calloway dropped to his knees, begging to return to the life he had walked away from in a black suit after a funeral. But what I remember most from that night isn't what he said. It's where his eyes went, past me, into the living room, to the photograph above the fireplace. Thomas, laughing, standing between us at a holiday dinner years earlier. Ryan stared at that photograph for a long time, and I think it was the first moment he genuinely understood the full weight of what he had thrown away. I handed him an umbrella from the stand by the door. "Go home, Ryan." He looked at me with an expression I had no name for. Because I think he understood then that he didn't really have one. The company was gone. Vanessa was gone. His reputation had been quietly dismantled. The friends who had orbited his status had dispersed the moment the status disappeared. He took the umbrella slowly. "I never wanted it to end this way," he said. That sentence told me everything it needed to. People who make the choices Ryan made never see themselves as the cause. They experience consequences as things that simply happen to them. Disasters that arrived without invitation. So rather than argue, I gave him the only honest thing I had left to offer. "You chose yourself over everyone who believed in you, every single time." Then he walked away into the rain. I never saw him again. Later I heard he'd resettled in Missouri and taken a logistics coordinator role after quietly resolving the fraud inquiry. Vanessa moved to Florida, searching, as far as anyone could tell, for another established life to step into. And me, I stayed. The company not only survived, it expanded. That following year we established the Thomas Whitfield Fund, offering full tuition support for employees' children pursuing university or skilled trade programs. The first recipient was a warehouse technician's daughter who wanted to study civil engineering. When I called to tell her, she couldn't speak for almost a full minute. After we said goodbye, I sat alone in my office and looked out at the Columbus skyline until the light changed, and I realized that for the first time since Thomas died, the grief didn't feel like just an absence. It felt like it was being used for something. The following winter I visited his grave during the first real snowfall of the season. I brought white tulips because he always kept them on his desk in February. Standing there in the cold, I finally said out loud what I'd been holding for over a year. You were right. I trusted the wrong people for too long. But Thomas also gave me something more than a warning. He gave me the chance to find out who I actually was when there was nothing left to hide behind. That's what people misunderstand about what comes after betrayal. It isn't about evening a score. It isn't about watching someone fall. It's about rebuilding yourself so completely, so honestly, that the people who dismissed you can no longer locate the person they thought they knew. It's about surviving with your integrity intact while they erode under the weight of everything they chose. Walking back toward my car, the winter light broke through the clouds and moved slowly across the snow between the graves. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't afraid of what was ahead. I had stopped waiting to feel ready. I had simply begun. And that, it turned out, was always the only way through.